Continue with Alpha Goldberg's book, chapter reading, Pentagon 9/11. This is chapter 20, Military Command and Operations Center. Just blow it up just a little bit more so that you could see it. Here we go. The Army, Navy, and Air Force Command and Operations Center in the Pentagon, operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, normally provided leaders with timely intelligence and information about operations around the world. Explosions and fire quickly destroyed the Navy Command Center on the first floor and killed many of its people, confronting the Navy with the urgent need to improvise a functioning operations center. Deprived of his command center, Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Vernon Clark, outside the building near North Parking shortly after 10:15 a.m., told his Vice Chief Admiral William Fallon and Vice Admiral Patricia Tracy, Director of the Navy staff, that he would not relocate to the Pentagon's alternate command post. Instead, he would move to the Washington Navy Yard, a few miles away in the District of Columbia. Some staff members had already left to prepare accommodations there in the headquarters building of the Naval Criminal Investigation Service, or NCIS. Secretary of the Navy Gordon England joined Clark at the temporary site. NCIS agents kept them informed of efforts to account for missing personnel, a top priority. Earlier, at Clark's direction, Fallon had traversed the short distance to the Navy Annex building on Columbia Pike to establish a command center that would allow Navy leaders to operate in close proximity to the Pentagon. By the time Fallon arrived, the Annex had been evacuated. He heard alarms still blaring there. The building had electrical power, but lost its air conditioning, a breakdown that could cause computerized communication systems to overheat and shut down. Still, the Marine Corps command center in the building was functioning. After its director, Major General Gordon Nash, offered space to the Navy, Fallon made arrangements for the Navy's leadership and support personnel to move there and to other space in the building. Maintenance crews began to set up portable air conditioners and exhaust fans for the center. Because of fear of another attack, however, only mission-essential personnel might enter the annex. Navy officers accepted an offer from the Virginia Department of Transportation to use a conference room in its building on Columbia Pike across from the annex where, with a laptop computer and a large white pad on an easel, they began to track casualties and those who had gotten out safely. Captain Thomas McCarty and a few others who drove to local hospitals reported by phone the names of the injured arriving for medical care. They also exchanged names with Army personnel trying to account for people at the hospitals. Throughout the night, Captain Mary Jo Sweeney and staff officers summoned technical support teams to prepare offices in the annex for the Navy's leadership. So, as you could see, that the Navy Command Center, even though it was destroyed, you had Navy command personnel basically operating in different areas of the Pentagon, still within the building. And, for those, especially for the fringe aspects of the truth movement, not everyone died, as you can see. There was a multitude of different units working within different floors of the Pentagon, so they were allowed to operate. They claimed that all the databases were destroyed on purpose. All the accounting, the non-allocation of funds, or the personnel databases, the transactional databases, the weapons database, all these were databases in which the Pentagon's accounting offices and Department of Defense financial transactions, the history thereof, they were all on one database. In other words, that's the truthers. They actually think, it was a big database that was destroyed. And no, there was different databases. This is why Donald Rumsfeld made that speech about, the Pentagon finances were non-allocated. That doesn't mean it was missing. There were different allocation of funds. In other words, waste spending was going on, and nobody waste spends more than the Pentagon. But you had different areas of spending, whether it be for pencils, whether it be for desks, cots, medical personnel, medical devices, to weapons. Each and every one has a different area of which that unit would, account for the finances. So that, just to not get you mixed up. I mean, this is the reason why they couldn't allocate the funds. And by the way, it wasn't like, because the plane crashed into the first floor that the investigation by the Pentagon's accounting offices, finished. The investigation was stalled. By the way, it's not 2.3 trillion anymore. It's much higher than that. It's over 13. So for these self-proclaimed experts in the 9/11 truth movement who make this stupid claim that Rumsfeld, the night before 9/11, is going to announce that there was missing money, why would he announce it at all if he knew what was going to happen? It's like, some of you people that basically think that, the art student ring, the Israeli art students, they were seen in the World Trade Center on the 83rd floor with their pictures taken of placing bombs. Now, just think about this. Just think about the simplicity and the silliness that these guys are going to have their picture taken placing bombs on the 83rd floor. What? First of all, they're not even Israeli. Second, they weren't placing bombs. Oh, God. Anyway, commandant of the Marine Corps General James Jones was leaving the building to attend a funeral in the District of Columbia when the plane hit. While he attended the funeral, his driver tried to maintain communications with the general staff at the Pentagon. On returning after 11 a.m., Jones went directly to a second office he maintained in the Navy Annex, meeting with his staff continually and receiving updates on casualties and the extent of damage. Later in the day, Admiral Clark and his staff moved from the Navy Yard to the Annex and joined Jones for meetings in the commandment's conference room. The Army Operations Center in the Pentagon basement functioned throughout the day. Half a world away in Singapore, Army Chief of Staff General Eric Shinsky learned of the attack on the World Trade Center and immediately telephoned the Operations Center, speaking with Brigadier General Peter Chiarelli, in charge of current operations there. Chiarelli gave Shinsky a much up-to-date information about the New York attacks as he could glean from CNN. An executive agent for the Department of Defense, the Army coordinated with the Navy and Air Force on proposed action to support civilian authorities during emergencies involving mass casualties. Chiarelli told Shinsky that in additional capacity as Director of Military Support, he had activated the Crisis Action Team to respond to the contingency in New York if requested by state and local officials. He anticipated that the World Trade Center disaster would require enormous rescue, firefighting, and recovery efforts. During the conversation with Shinsky, an intelligence analyst interrupted to inform Chiarelli that another aircraft had been hijacked. One was thought to be headed toward Washington. Sensing the urgency of the situation, Shinsky ended the phone call, saying that he would call back later. Shortly thereafter, Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. Chiarelli later described the impact as a muffled noise. Soon, senior Army leaders, including Vice Chief of Staff General John Keane and Secretary of the Army Thomas White, streamed into the Operations Center. Word came that the Pentagon's continuity of operations plan required White to leave the building for the alternate command site. He wanted to stay, but his staff advised that he go like Wolfowitz. He departed by helicopter. All day, smoke threatened to close down the crowded Army Operations Center. Colonel Bruce Bradhouse, head of the Command and Control Support Agency responsible for keeping the center functioning, depended on engineer Alvin Nieder to operate fans and open regular emergency doors to create strong drafts that would pull out much of the smoke. Water from fire hoses and burst pipes flowed down corridors, hallways, and stairwells and seeped through floor and walls and cracks toward the AOC's computer and telephone lines and electrical systems. Nieder monitored the water flow all evening. At 1 a.m. on September 12th, he and NMCC engineer Michael Bartos waded through water over a foot deep in A&E Drive to clear debris from drains, especially the heavy muck from water-saturated ceiling tiles. Their efforts prevented short-circuiting of systems, allowing the response centers to function continually during the crisis. The center's immediate task was to account for Army personnel, an effort spearheaded by the Personnel Contingency Cell, which members of the Crisis Action Team assisting. Initially, working with a social roster sent by her through email a week earlier, Major Karina Boggess and her colleagues located other rosters and compiled personnel lists. Colonel Mark Lewis, Director of Plans, Resources, and Operations in the Army's Devastated Personnel Office, called the cell with valuable information about the impact site and escapees from the building. He had departed his office in the B ring and could not re-enter the building, and now led a team of 4 as they operated from an empty trailer at the Pentagon renovation program office near North Parking. His team spent the entire day and night making phone calls, coordinating information about the injured, missing, and safe. In the Air Force Council conference room on the mezzanine level of the Pentagon basement, General John Jumper was chairing his first staff meeting as Air Force Chief of Staff when he learned the attack on the World Trade Center at approximately 9 a.m. A large screen displayed coverage of the burning North Tower after the first hijacked airliner had slammed into it. The group then saw United Airlines Flight 171 crash into the South Tower. After viewing televised news for about 8 minutes, Jumper resumed the meeting, concluded it, and quickly departed for his office. When Flight 77 struck the Pentagon, Jumper and Secretary of the Air Force John Roche rushed to their operations center on the mezzanine. Members of the Air Force Crisis Action Team had already begun to assemble there for a 10 a.m. briefing. One of their responsibilities was to work with the Army to provide assistance to civil authorities in New York. They soon activated a team to focus on continuity of operations. Over the next few hours, efforts to ventilate the smoke penetrated the operations center failed. At 12:20 p.m., about the time conditions forced Rumsfeld to move from the National Military Command Center. Air Force leaders and assistants left their center for Bowling Air Force Base just across the Potomac River. Like their Navy counterparts, the Secretary and the Chief of Staff chose to stay near the Pentagon and not travel to the emergency headquarters well outside Washington. They went to Bowling by helicopter. By 1 p.m., the new operations center was functioning. Surgeon General Paul Charlton, who had come from rescue operations at the center of the Pentagon, briefed Roche and Jumper on medical assistance, equipment, people, and air evacuation that the Air Force could provide to both New York City and the national capital region. The leaders approved Carlton's plan to send medical personnel and equipment to McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey to stand by to assist civilians in New York as needed. At 3 a.m., after conditions on the mezzanine level had improved, operational command was moved back to the Pentagon. The operations center became fully operational at the Pentagon at 5:30 a.m. on September 12th, faster than expected. But that's what happens when you have coordinated efforts from different areas of the military working in conjunction. This was actually something that I brought up when I interviewed the Pentagon Incident Commander James Schwartz from the Arlington County Fire Department about how well different areas of personnel at the hospitals, personnel at the fire departments, personnel at the FBI and police all worked well together, because Schwartz said that he learned that from when he had meetings with people from the Oklahoma City bombing and how well they coordinated there together. And he wanted that in regards to emergency personnel at an emergency type of situation regarding Arlington County. And look how well it worked here with the Pentagon. All right, guys, that's it for this chapter. See you in the next chapter reading of the Pentagon from Alpha Goldberg. Thank you for tuning in.